Okay, everybody, welcome back. We are now moving on to zoning chapter decisions, financial contributions and other recommendations. These are the Recs 22 to 49. I'm moving it and Pauline is seconding it. So we have the first lot we've got coming up for questions is recommendations 22 to 26, and they are on page 7 of your little booklet. Has anyone got any questions of staff for those ones? Alrighty. Yeah.
Just for clarity's purpose, we're voting to push through with this and then the amendments come forward. Therefore, okay. Yep.
The other ones, yeah. Yeah.
So, in a high level, can you just explain in terms of 22 what the panel's recommendations do?
So this is to continue the zoning that you've decided on already on the 18th of September. So it simply extends the zone.
Right.
So just to add to that, on the 18th of September, you decided on the provisions for the city centre zone, but there were some parts of the proposed city centre zone that were left out of that decision.
Yeah.
And those parts left out related to qualifying matters, which were to be considered in this meeting. And
Right.
so in deciding on whether you accept or reject the panel's recommendations on those qualifying matters informs your decision on the zoning, or vice versa.
So we're adding some more qualifying matters based on the panel's recommendations, or we're removing more?
So the
Effectively, the panel's accepted some qualifying matters, but rejected others. So we need to go through those to explain them. But an example of where they accepted the recommendation was the radio communication pathway, which extends over the central city mixed-use zone. But they rejected other qualifying matters, such as the Victoria Street height overlay.
Okay, thank you. Right. Recommendations 27 to 31 on page 8. Are there any questions leaping out at us? Gary?
Thanks. In terms of the enhanced development mechanism, can you just explain a little bit more about what that actually is?
The enhanced development mechanism is an operative overlay that exists within the district plan. The IHP recommendation is to retain that. Effectively, what it states is that when you meet a certain criteria, mostly location-based to different amenities, public transport, schools and the like, that there is a more lenient framework that exists. It's a function of the residential suburban zone, and the reason why it's been retained is because the residential suburban zone has sought to be retained where there is an overlap with those coastal hazard areas. So, like for example, tsunami becomes quite deep, and so that means that the residential suburban zone is retained, and the same with the overlay for enhanced development mechanism. There's no change to the operative framework; it simply is retaining what's there.
Right. So it basically makes it easier to develop in residential
Suburban areas, yeah.
outside of the policy area 4 and 3.
So it's more about whether consequential. This is a decision where they're consequential on this decision. So where there's like naming changes and the like. Like I said, it's not really an overlap in terms of the policy 3 areas. And again, it's simply retaining the operative. There's no change at all with the provisions.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to Recs 32 to 38 on page 9. Oh, sorry, Tyler, you had a question. Oh, I didn't cross your name out. Maybe you got it. Did you?
Yeah, cool. Just a question around.
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Mel, please.
Oh, cool.
Just as a type on Princess Margaret.
I don't think you got a question.
Did I cut you off? Tyler, would you like to have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted some clarity on part 27, referring to page 8. Can you just elaborate a bit more on the residential visitor accommodation zones?
So these are, Zones exist in the operative plan.
Yeah.
They are scattered throughout the urban environment. They are captured as part of this because they fall, in some cases, within a Policy 3 context, and so they get upzoned. Intensified further in terms of the degree of housing or building form that could be done in those areas. They are done to the same degree as their adjoining residential zones, on the basis that should visitor accommodation not proceed, like a motel or a hotel or whatever the case may be, then the alternative zoning is the adjoining high density or medium density and the like.
Okay, so just reading the recommendation here, anything outside of the Policy 3 area is not counted within the zone?
So it's just outside of the decision making for today.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yanni?
I just think it would be helpful, like, the document where the panel's recommendations are, whereabouts is that?
So there's an attachment to the agenda in which council officers have outlined in a kind of plain English language what the panel's recommendation is versus the alternative recommendation. Yes.
So it's not this. There's another document.
Yes, that's one resource, and the other resource I believe is the link to the panel's recommendations that's provided in the agenda as well.
Yeah. So this one, does this basically enable more Airbnbs to be built effectively?
This zone is most definitely not intended for an Airbnb level. This is a motel or hotel level of intensification. Again, it's the same building form as the adjoining residential areas that are intensified through Policy 3.
So this is the residential visitor accommodation zone is effectively a spot zone for that is a legacy of the last district plan and includes the likes of the George Hotel, the former Chateau in the Park.
So it's existing ones.
Other sites where there's a greater scale than what would otherwise be anticipated by the residential zone if it was zoned residential.
Okay.
And Airbnb is the nature of Airbnb is that it's typically within residential units, which are typically in residential zones. So this is different.
Thanks.
Okay. Tim, then Tyler.
Thank you. This is on 32. So are we onto that group yet? Or am I jumping ahead like you?
Yeah, no, we're sort of hovering around there.
Okay. Right, just with 32. So Princess Margaret Hospital isn't technically being used as a hospital, is it? Or so you've got the 3 hospitals there. What's the difference?
The main reason is about where they fall in terms of Policy 3. And so all of these aren't within one of those Policy 3 catchments, so they've been excluded accordingly. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Tyler.
Yeah, cool. This, in regards to Dean's Ave, Councillor Killen's alternative recommendation, would that still provide potential for a hotel or motel to be built?
No, so it's just the height and building form that's being altered. The change of use isn't part of the scope of this plan change process. That's only in relation to a commercial centre because it's within and around those commercial centres. This isn't a centre zone; it's a residential zone. So only the form and the associated controls around that are within scope of the plan change.
Okay.
Okay, so now recommendations 39 to 43. Has anyone got any questions? All good. Okay, and we'll do the last one, Recs 44 to 49. That's on page 11.
And just noting there, Mayor, that in 46B, that matter can now be struck out because of the table change for recommendation 67.
Thank you.
Alternative to this.
Just
Yeah, Katie. Yeah, great.
Sorry, can you clarify? It's the full B to be struck?
Correct.
Thank you.
Excellent. There she goes. Right. Okay. So,
sorry, did you go?
oh, sorry. Did you have a question?
Did you go up to 49 or just to 46? Oh, yeah, cool. I just wanted to flag to add after the impact on Pacific communities, just to add on Māori and Pacific. So it was I'm just signalling just a slight additional word there.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
Question, please.
No. Right, Mark, you got a question?
Yeah, just a quick question around 47, the financial contributions to tree canopy cover. Is that something that the panel basically is rejecting, and we can address that at a later date through another mechanism?
That's correct. We can do a separate Schedule 1 plan change thereafter, which is what Councillor Coker has signalled in 48.
Yep.
Thank you.
Excellent. Righto, so I think we got to the end of those. So now we will debate all of those from 22 to 49. Who would like to kick off? Melanie.
Again, just quick, I'll support all of these, and just, you've just mentioned about the financial contributions for tree canopy cover, so I'm glad we're going to look at it in the future, which is why we should support putting more money towards our...
Pragmatic approach. Okay, Mark. Oh, Mark, then Pauline.
Yeah, just again on that tree canopy financial contributions, keen to see that revisited down the track when we get the chance to try and encourage better tree canopy and financial contributions through planning mechanisms. Look forward to that down the track.
Mm-hmm. Pauline?
Okay, I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
I won't repeat it, take up all the time, you know.
Have you finished? Yes. Yanni, please.
Yeah.
Oh, do you only have it? Yeah, you go first, then, Aaron. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I remain deeply troubled by the extent of the recommendations in this section. And again, it seems to be that the entire district plan was up for consideration. And, it does seem odd to me in terms of the process that so many things can be added in terms of other zones that suddenly get carried into these intensification and urban development plan changes. I understand the intent, I guess, of what the government was trying to do, but it does seem inherently unfair to the citizens of our city to have such a huge amount of changes being made and so many different processes attached to it, rather than just simply doing a single district plan review, which effectively is what most of these recommendations are doing. It's fundamentally changing our entire district plan to be more enabling of development. And so I do retain a lot of concern about that. I think the other thing that's really concerning is, and I do actually agree with the IHP, was the impact of our social impact assessment not being adequate enough, and they were quite clear in their thing that there were submissions from people in the community that raised concerns about the inequitable outcomes for urban Māori, for example. I asked questions around what assessment was done around things like the impact on Pacific communities, where we know that the Pacific community has one of the lowest rates of home ownership in our city. And there was almost I think I was told there was no assessment done of that. Hence I've put forward the noting provision. And it does seem inherently unfair to me in terms of this process that we don't have the time to get additional things done to inform the decisions that are being made. We have to kind of make a decision on this process and then ask for the additional work to be done, whether it's around trees or whether it's around the social impact. But what's really clear from the IHP's hearing decision was that there are concerns about the extent of the social impact assessment that we did in terms of understanding the impact on local communities, particularly in some of those lower socioeconomic communities, and the impact of gentrification on intensification. So I've tried to put something forward that's constructive and gets that work done, noting that actually at the very start of this process several years ago, this was also one of the requests that was made to try and ensure that this work got done as part of this process. So it is pretty disappointing that we are where we are today. But I'll support 48 and 49, but I do wish to record my opposition to the previous resolutions in this chapter or in this section that we're doing today. Thank you.
Right, before I start putting these out, Aaron?
Yeah, just on the tree canopy cover one, I think we should be quite open-minded about how we do that and be outcome focused rather than when you lock to a particular site. We might put a financial penalty in there and you know, you plant a street tree for the council and it's $2,000. Anthony Shabolt can deliver us 200 trees for that. So if they're on a different location, if it's about canopy cover, we should be open-minded, because fine for someone to be and it does put the price of the house up, let's not forget that, but affordable housing is not really part of this, but if it's canopy cover, we want $2,000 in a planting block is a lot more than one tree that eventually just ruins the infrastructure all around it and causes a whole lot of issues. So we should just be open-minded and looking for the outcome rather than a very tight process going forward.
We'll do that when Melanie's thing comes along. Right, I'm going to put up for vote. It's already moved and seconded. Recs 22 to 26. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Yanni recorded, please. Yes. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Recs 27 to 31. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you, that's carried. Recs 32 to 38. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Just have my vote against 38, thanks.
38 against 38. You got that, Katie?
Yes.
Yeah, good, thank you. Recs 39 to 43. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Yanni against. And Recs 44 to 49. All those in favour? Aye. Against? And you're 48 and 49?
No, but just have, what about 8? Does 8 need? Just have my vote recorded in favour of 48 and 49, the rest against.
Sorry, Councillor Johansson.
Does that create any problems with adding
Councillor Johansson, apologies. Can you repeat what recommendations you wanted your vote to record
Yeah,
again?
from the 44 to the 49, so in favour of 48 and 49?
Yes.
Against the remaining ones in that section.
Ike, with that on number 46A, is what I was talking about earlier, is that going to cause grief with us?
Yeah, so... Excuse me. So that is part of the Policy 3 response, is the medium density around local centre catchments. And correct, if you are concerned around the intensification as a result of Policy 3 for the Fendleton Centre, then it is worthwhile to add that in there in replace of what is B, to say around the Fendleton Centre as well, noting that in terms of this is a preclusion for the alternative to be considered separately, and so that alternative, our preference again would be to consider that tomorrow, so we can ensure the submission alignment and the materials are in place for that. But the preclusion is worthwhile to add in there if that's your intent.
Add that in there.
Correct.
Thanks. Thank you.
So it's B.
Thank you. Okay, so did I to the next bit, Sam's bit? Oh, okay, right.
So where are we at? Do we vote on all those or not? So are we going back to number 46?
Yes, we can do. We can go back. So essentially, the recommendations 44 through 49 were already voted on. 46B has been essentially an addition. So we can vote on 46B now.
So,
And we've suspended standing orders as well.
That's
So-
correct.
is that right?
I'm for the big bit of 46, but against 8B.
So regarding the amended recommendation 46, 46. You are now recording against A as well?
So, right, just a bit of clarification what I'm saying next. So we're doing 46 as a separate one, are we?
Yes.
Okay, so 46, did you have a question, Andre?
Well, I see an area's been added in.
Question. Pardon?
An area's been added in as B. So just to clarify, we are able to chop, change, add to any recommendations for the rest of the day?
No.
No, but there's one change right there.
With the recommendations,
Want to check on precedent.
With the recommendations that some of the other councillors put in, which have been very pragmatic and moved them all back, this one I feel got missed because it's in one of the councillors' areas that is not allowed to compete.
Understood. Yeah.
And it was talked about but never got there. So all I did was just asked if it could go in. But
yeah. But so just to clarify, we can do the same for any other amendments today, and if we feel something's been missed, we can try and address it.
No, so these recommendations were moved by the mayor and seconded by the deputy mayor. So with any typical process, it would be upon the agreement of the mover and seconder that this
Understood.
addition would be added. So
And if indeed there are those things, then it's possible for the remainder of today and the decisions we have ahead of us.
I suppose it has to be reasonable.
If there is that agreement, we can do that for any.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm putting 46, Katie?
Yes.
All right, so all those in favour of 46A and B? Aye. Against? Thank you. You all happy? You got that? Yep. Yes. So that is carried. Thank you very much.
A and B? Yeah, A and B.
Right. Thank you very much, everyone. We are now up to Rec 50. Residential Chapter Alternative Officer recommendation. So, have we got any questions for staff on that? Or do you want to tell us a wee story about it? No questions to staff? What are we doing, John?
Sorry, what was
A or B?
Yeah, A first.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Yes.
So 50A first.
50A first?
So there it is on the screen now.
Okay, so I've got to move and second on this. I'll put number 50A first. All those in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried. So B doesn't exist.
So then the B just falls over. Yeah.
So on to 51.
Is that right?
Yes.
Good. So that's carried. Thank you. Rec 50. So now we get into the fun part of the day. Page 7. Mark's not here. So this is Rickett Bush interface. Recommendation number 51. Tyler and Sam. Any questions, please? Nope. So it's got a mover and seconder. I'll put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. Couple there.
These votes against, that's Councillor Coker and Councillor Moore. Thank you.
Okay, that's carried.
Yeah,
We're debating. Oh, sorry.
Questions
Oh,
and
sorry.
debate.
Sorry. No, I shouldn't. Yes, that's my fault. We're debating the whole lot at the finish, and that's a long way away. Yeah, we'll vote then. So we should just scrap that vote. Scrap that one because it should have been. Yep, that's
Questions.
Yep, questions. Right. Sorry, that's my mistake. Papanui War Memorial recommendation 52. Is there any questions on that?
Do you want to go back to this one first, or?
No, there were no questions.
Oh, okay.
There was no questions. Any questions on Rec 52? Okie dokie. Rec 53, high density zone, residential zone catchment around Riccarton. Any questions on that? Number 53.
Yes, just to clarify, I can vote separately on the two.
Yes, so again, once we vote, every single alternative recommendation will be voted on separately. If members would like to register their vote against a certain aspect of the recommendation.
Thank you very much.
More than welcome. Okay. Right, number 54, 25 Deans Ave, building height. That's Aaron and Kelly. Any questions on that? Excellent. Sorry, yeah, far away.
Hey guys, just in regards to this, is this just the way I'm reading it? It seems as though it's only for residential. So is that insinuating that there may be apartment blocks in comparison to maybe a commercial residential interface in that area?
So as previous, the zoning is only residential. So it's residential purpose. The change in this is to simply increase the height to 36 metres in this instance, which is about 11 stories or so.
You're right. You're good, Tom? Come back for another question if you like. Aaron, and then Yanni.
So if someone come in for a change of use on that site, or
A
plan
rezoning,
change,
sorry.
yeah,
Yep.
a rezoning, yeah, on that site, would the 36 still apply?
That would depend on the evidence presented, to be honest. It would be possible.
Like a really, really good-looking hotel type thing.
It's not about the looks, but it may very well,
Some of
as
it's
a result
all
of the
about the
plan
looks.
change, say, yes, you can do a different activity than residential, but it's only limited to 20 metres or something like that. There are the rationale for different provisions in terms of height is a lot of the time based on its economic effects in terms of pull effects from centres, and so I'm sure that would be part of the consideration, but it's up to the evidence that's presented at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Yanni, please.
Can you just clarify the difference between the previous proposed amendment and this one?
The only difference fundamentally is the extra height. So in the first, it's to zone at high density, which is, for lack of a better term, vanilla high density permitted at 14 metres. And Councillor Kewen's amendment is to add a precinct on top of that, which adds an additional height to 36 metres instead as a permitted activity.
Only in
Increase
that.
of 22
Only in that area.
metres in height between the two amendments.
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Okay, you're right, Yanni. You're good. Thank you. The next one is Rec 55. Now that's where we need to add in what we talked about earlier. Is that right, John?
Yes, the Fendleton Village question.
Do you want that evident now?
We'll wait to see what's done.
So our preference again is to vote on that separately, so the work has been done, rather than adding that now and being voted on in terms of the Fendleton Village.
Correct. Okay.
Just to be clear on that, but that doesn't mean that the other parts can't be voted on now or later on.
Fair enough too. So we do we have a B or something? No.
There's a B on that. I
Yeah,
think,
B.
Okay. Right. Okay, the next one is another one of Tyler's City Spine qualifying matter at number 56. Is there any questions on that? Melanie?
Can you just describe it again so I've got it clear in my mind? Exactly what this meaning. So about the front yards, yeah, can you just describe it again?
So the City Spine qualifying matter was put forward to protect development along key public transport routes, being Papanui Road and further to Belfast, and then Riccarton Road further to Hornby. It was principally premised on the basis that should greater public transport be delivered within those corridors, there should be an option for road widening at the end of the day. There isn't a designation in place for that, to protect that. The original or the notified position was to ensure that operative setbacks would be retained, as well as other bespoke controls for outdoor living space and tree planting and alike, to make sure that that corridor wasn't obstructed. The amendment that's been put forward has only focused on retaining that status quo control because of the High Court precedent. So it hasn't introduced that new control around outdoor living space and alike. And so the alternative is simply saying retaining the operative setbacks within that corridor along Papanui and Riccarton.
Yanni?
Have we done was there an economic analysis done of the cost of not having that space provided for and allowing development on it? Like is it billions of dollars in terms of what we'd have to pay if we wanted to do mass rapid transit to buy up all the...
I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Right.
I don't have that information, I'm afraid.
Is it fundamentally this will place the burden or the cost on the council in the future to acquire land that's developed on if we want to do have mass rapid transit up these corridors, right? Instead of having it set back.
Sure, yeah. The fundamental logic is to say, well, if we allow for development within that front part of the site, then if we have the future scenario where we have to purchase land, we also need to purchase those buildings, which increases the cost. And so we want to, as much as we can, ensure that that is a lower cost if that scenario eventuates into the future.
Yeah. So the hearing panel recommendation was to not protect that land and to enable development on it. And the recommendation is to restrict as much as possible the development on that land for the future.
In the front proportion of the site, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Who else we got? No one. Yeah, Tyler. Yeah.
Great. And based off of that, and looking at the future MRT prospects, with this qualifying matter here, it addresses predominantly the whole spine. Does that include Hornby? Off the top of my head?
I believe it does go through to the Hornby Centre because that was part of the premise of the business case. Yeah.
Cool. And the predominant pinch points where we may need to ensure that that city spine qualifying matter is set is around the Church Corner catchment and maybe a couple of narrow areas within the Riccarton Road boundaries. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, what part of the evidence that was put forward was around preferred locations, and you're right, those locations that you mentioned are preferred stop locations for future mass rapid transit.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Victoria.
Yeah, I'm just seeking some clarification, please. It's not that the panel removed the protection entirely on the city spine, because as I understood it, they were still happy to apply the front yard setbacks of 1.5 metres. So can I just clarify, given that the 1.5 metre setback is already there in the panel recommendation, have I got that wrong?
Sorry, just in terms of the phrasing of already there, the operative setback in most instances is about 4.5 metres in residential areas. It varies based on the residential zoning, but the suburban zoning is 4.5 metres in the front setback. And so effectively what the panel would be doing is changing that from 4.5 to 1.5 metres as a result of applying the MDRs.
And this amendment then is taking it back to 4.5?
Retaining the 4.5, or in some cases it's 2 metres if it's RMD zoning, for example, as well. So in all instances, it's simply retaining the operative setback.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All happy with Rec 56? Right, Rec 57, sunlight access qualifying matter. Okie dokie. Number 58, high density around Hornby Town Centre. Number 58. Questions? Good. 59, high density residential zone permitted building height in Hornby. Number 59. Any questions on that? Yes, you can go if you like.
Is there any logic to viewing Hornby differently to Papanui, say? No, it's almost getting into the realm of opinions, but
sorry, can I just intervene there? It's not the role of staff to comment on the logic of any alternative resolutions.
All right.
Good try. Okay, now, number 60, please. Number 60, town centre zone permitted building heights in Hornby. Any questions on that? Nope. The next one is town centre zone building heights and form in Linwood. Any questions on that one? Excellent. High density residential is number 62. Residential walking catchment round Linwood town centre. This is number 62. Any questions on that one? Right. High density residential zone permitted building heights in Linwood, number 63. Things are going too nicely here. Something's going to go wrong. Airport noise influence area controls, Rec 64. Any questions on that one? Dokie. City centre walking catchment and Sydenham mixed zones, mixed use zoning, Rec 65. Now that's been trimmed up a bit. Is that the one? It's backed off a bit.
No, this one.
No.
That's the other one that's been.
Okay, sorry, yep, my mistake. Any questions on that? Victoria.
I missed number 64. Can I just get some clarity on this? I thought it was 2 units. And it's 3 units. Oh, when it kicks in. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just ask.
Yeah.
This is Christchurch NZ land, so is there any conflicts around this? Like
What's Christchurch NZ?
Milton Street. Oh, you're going back to 64.
Yeah, so, righto, so we're all done 64. We're now, sorry, Yanni, we're now up to 60. Yeah. Yeah.
In layman's terms, can you just clarify what the recommendation is here?
The recommendation is to change the threshold by 1 unit in terms of consent being more onerous, in terms of resource consent being required, and also removing the presumption that there'll be notification required to the airport for any such development.
Cool. Sweet. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to number 65, and you've got a question, I think, Yanni, is that right?
Sorry, is this is applying to Christchurch NZ owned land?
66.
65 around Sydney.
65. Oh, yeah.
65.3.
Yeah,
65.4. Sorry, can you just just at a high level, just explain the impact of what's being proposed here compared to the panels?
Yeah, so there's twofold. Fundamentally, it's about increasing the walking catchment from the central city, and in doing so, it would make sure that the currently industrially zoned land to the south of the city is captured and change that from being industrially zoned to mixed use zone, and that would extend from Addington to Lancaster Park, to put it simply. Further to the north, there's also, instead of the border of high density being held at Beatty Ave, it would continue to the north to connect to the high density that has been recommended by the IHP further up Papanui Road.
So just
to add to that, sorry, this answering the 65 in respect to the mixed use zone is the area between Morehouse Avenue and Brougham Street. The 66 is in respect of land held by Christchurch NZ on Milton Street, right, which is beyond that.
Yeah. And so in terms of the industrial, it's basically putting a mixed use zone in the industrial. So it's rezoning industrial land.
Correct.
So I'm just trying to understand, so we're able to change the use of industrial land to be more enabling, but we can't control the industrial activities around anything to do with reverse sensitivity.
So it's about the policy 3 response. So because it's within those centres, then it comes into the fold. So basically anything within those policy 3 catchments is able to be considered in terms of the intensification around that. And the council position was that the best way to achieve that was through a mixed-use zoning, being 1.2 walking catchment from the central city.
It cannot be more restrictive than the status quo or the operative district plan, so industrial activities are still enabled and we can't put additional controls on those industrial activities.
Yeah. And what assessment has been, I mean, I guess it's probably not really the time to go into it, but just, I guess that if, in terms of reverse sensitivity and effects, you know, obviously we've had a lot of issues with the noise and the local businesses. Has that been considered as part of this, or this puts us more at risk from that type of?
So within the provisions for the mixed-use zone, comprehensive residential development is a restricted discretionary activity, and one of the matters of discretion deals with reverse sensitivity, so we can assess that in the context of comprehensive residential development. Right. There is still a risk, but at least for a consent process, we can assess that risk.
One of the main things to recognise is that any residential development, like Mark said, requires resource consent, but also requires a minimum of 4 stories. And so there's quite a scale change that would needed to be required in order to achieve a residential outcome in the zone. Right. And so that mitigates the reverse sensitivity effect by having a scale change.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Victoria?
Thank you. I just want to double back and get some clarity then on the Sydenham Yard and the land owned by CNZ, with both Councillor McClellan and myself directors on CNZ. Is that should we be conflicted out of that particular part of that in relation to number 65A4?
Just to emphasise the point I made before, this resolution 65 is in respect of land north of Brougham Street. 66 is in respect of the Sydenham Yard site.
So just be 66.
Yeah, 66 will be the one.
I'll ask that question at number 66.
Ask it again.
Ask it again. Thank you.
Righto. Melanie?
I'm kind of backtracking but asking a broad question, which I don't remember asking at all. And so it refers back to the different centres that we've got. With the centre classifications, was there ever any time that we could have changed, whether something was classified as a town centre or a large local centre?
So, like I said in the earlier presentation, the position within the hierarchy wasn't really one for consideration. So there were submitters that sought to change different positions, and that's been rejected by the hearings panel. Right. And so fundamentally what's happened is a rehousing to National Planning Standards Framework, and as a result of that, the rules have been increased fundamentally to enable further intensification.
Okay, Pauline?
Just so, the walkable catchment, the recommendation, is from the central city zone, which is that's from the edge, which Correct. Is around the 4Fs.
Incorrect, no. So the city centre zone is the commercial zoning in the core, and so that extends from on Victoria Street by Beeley Ave further to the south, and captures all the commercial zoning within there. Yeah. It's not the 4 avenues. Where the hearings panel have landed is to say that in terms of defining a walking catchment from the edge of that commercial zone, there is effectively between 0 metres and an 800 metre on average walking catchment to ensure that the 4 avenues are captured for intensification. So they have drawn the walking catchment boundary effectively to be the 4 avenues.
And so the amendment is to increase that to 1.2 kilometres.
To reduce it.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
So from north of Beeley Ave, I mean, I'm struggling to find the map for that, but can you tell me how far north that would go?
There is a map in Appendix 2. I'm not too sure if we can pull it up.
Well, just tell me.
So the green line is Sarah's amendment. Is it? Yeah, it might be helpful if you explain the green line and the... Oh.
So how far north of Beeley does it go around about? And then how far to the, I think, how far to the, that one? Really hard to read that.
The
Clarify
green line, roughly?
Yeah.
Phil.
So,
Can I clarify that I pulled it in?
Oh, have you?
Yeah, so that I was going to clarify as my next question was that while it says 1.2 in the alternative recommendation, it's actually much smaller than 1.2 in on the east side and at the north. So I pulled it in from Edgware and those kind of places. So it's only like a block or two up from BB rather than the larger extent that was originally notified by council.
So are you looking at like Springfield Road now or something like that?
So the,
are we able to pull up that map?
So the map's on the thing.
And it's the green line. So the orange is what we were originally notified.
65.
65 at the moment.
There we go. So Pauline, on the screen you can see, sorry.
But you're pulling it in now.
Yeah, so I've pulled it in from what council originally notified, but it's larger than what the
So just to
panel
explain what you're seeing on the image there.
That's it.
Yeah, everything in the orange colour was the council reply, the final position that council had.
Yeah.
Everything in the yellow outline there was where the hearings panel recommendation is for high density, and then the green dotted line is Councillor Templeton's alternative, and so that on the northern end beyond Beeley Ave is to extend to connect to the high density in Mirrorvale, and then on the southern end is the mixed use that extends from Addington to Lancaster Park there.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't support the northern side of Beeley Ave being extended. How do I deal with that in a vote? Do I have to just vote against all of it? Can't really pull it out. No, okay.
I want to do the mixed use bit down the bottom
Yeah,
in the
I
south.
can't.
But we need to find a way to do that then.
Make it Beeley Ave as a
So I could support 65 number 3. If we put, and then just oppose 1 and 2.
Sam, did you have a question in the middle of all this?
Along a similar line as Pauline, that's quite a significant.
This is the map that we were shown a couple of weeks ago.
No, I completely get that and obviously saw it, but it's quite a large part. Oh, maybe so. Is the mechanism just to vote against?
Yeah.
What Sarah's proposing?
I think voting against 1 and 2 would work, and you can support Sydenham.
Okay.
The mixed use stuff I thought made sense, but the other stuff's quite a massive change for
So that's
that community.
That's 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. All good.
Okay.
Any other? Yanni?
The contrast between what the hearing panel and the council's final position and the alternative amendment, my understanding from looking at the green line, that it's more restrictive than what currently has been put in place. So if you vote against the amendment, I just want to be clear, you're actually voting for the stuff that's north of it. No? Okay.
No, so everything in the yellow outline
Yeah.
is the high density residential zone that the hearings panel has recommended.
Yeah.
And so you can see there ending in at Beeley Ave and then around the centre for Mirrorvale.
Yeah.
Everything in the orange is what the council final position was, and so everything that's just orange is been rejected. The alternative recommendation is to extend that beyond the yellow, and so it would be an extension of high density
It's just a
effectively
small
up
section
Papanui
of it.
Road to the Mirrorvale Centre, and then capturing the mixed use to the south.
Sorry. So the green line, what can you just tell me what the green boundary is?
That's the catchment of high density that wants
Gerald.
that's part of the alternative.
That's Sarah's
Right. So
alternative.
the stuff that's north of the green line
No, it's gone.
is gone in the amendment, but then I heard that
was gone by the panel.
we were told that it was extending it along
Yeah.
Papanui Road into Maryvale.
Yeah, that's right. So everything that's north of Beeley Ave along Papanui Road that connects to the high density on Maryvale, that is within scope. So you can see that full extent there in the green dotted line. Outside of that green dotted line and outside of anything that's in the yellow outline is beyond the consideration of today. That is beyond the Policy 3 catchment.
Okay, we'll just, you guys might have to reword that a little bit.
Yeah, and I just want to share. Effectively, this is this is enabling more high density residential, like around the stadium, for example, and around the bars on St. Asaph Street. So the live music venues.
That's not part of the alternative. That's part of what the IHP recommendation is within the 4 avenues.
Right.
This is beyond the 4 avenues.
So the 4 avenues is already there in the IHP recommendation.
Yeah.
Everything in the yellow is the IHP.
On the stadium side, the effect of this amendment is actually bringing the boundaries back. To,
Nothing on that side. I've kept it at the IHP recommendation.
it's very hard to tell from these maps.
Yeah.
Can I explain what I think it is? So the orange is what council put forward, but it got rejected. So forget about the orange. The yellow is what the IHP's recommended. That Sarah's trying to do that green bit up in the orange above to join up so that it's all high density all the way along Colombo and into...
Well, and up Papanui Road.
Yeah, it was Papanui.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So just forget the orange, and we're trying to make the yellow join up.
Okay.
It takes the pressure off the suburban centres by having it in the central city.
Alrighty. So, Timothy?
For the colourblind of us and the ones that are more interested in the south rather than the north, the area between Morehouse Ave and Brum Street, that is now being put forward an alternative with regards to intensification housing. Is that correct?
Through a mixed use zoning, that is correct.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, even though we haven't actually filled the central city, as we were way behind all the estimates, and we don't know where all those small companies are going to go. And
It's all used for if you look at the evidence stuff, it's all only about 2% is actually being used for industrial at the moment. Most of it's being used just for storage, and it's walking distance from the central city.
Yeah.
This was what we originally notified in the plan. Yeah.
Just thinking outside the square a little bit, should we, when we come to this one, put it as the stuff to the north and the stuff to the south is separate?
So effectively, you could deal with it, I think, in the subpoints. So, for example, Roman numeral 2 talks about applying the high density residential zone as per the attachment. So fundamentally, in that image, in the high density zone is all to the north. And so the mixed use zoning and the associated precinct and the like is captured in Roman numeral 3.
Oh,
so you could segment it out that way. I would note, just for clarity, that there are some very small isolated areas of high density zoning adjacent to the mixed use on the southern end as well. Quite niche, but just ensuring that that's captured there. But that would be, in my view, a simple way to split it.
So it's already split.
So just to clarify that, Ike, you're saying if there's concerns about some of the intensification to the north, over and above the IHP recommendation, that would be covered by 2.
Yeah, so 2 captures all high density residential zoning. So if you're not interested, or any councillors are not interested in progressing with an increase in high density residential zoning, then it simply would be to vote against Roman numeral 2. But conversely, if you're interested only in the mixed use element, then Roman numeral 3 was where you're at, and also as part of that 4, which is quite necessary to achieve that as well.
Wonder when we get to this one, can we be really clear on what
We will have to be,
yeah, because it's pretty important.
All done, Victoria?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with some of those areas to the south. Can I just have explained, please, the yellow, can we put the map back up? The yellow block at the very bottom of the map, which is now being excluded outside Sarah's dotted green lines. What is that and what's the rationale for that?
That's outside of scope of this alternative. The IHP recommendation is to include that as part of the catchment from Sydenham full stop. And so that is simply being considered as part of the recommendation to accept the IHP's recommendation for high density.
No, I didn't quite get that. Is that being, if number 3 is accepted, so
Is that in or out?
If number 3 is in, sub 3, does that exclude that bottom yellow piece outside the green dotted line?
It's not part of the alternative. The green dotted line captures the full extent of the alternative. It's not being considered as part of this alternative recommendation.
It's already there.
Just noting, Councillor Henstock, that it's still medium density under the operative plan as well, so you can still do multi-unit development in that area.
Thank you.
Okay, right, we'll go on to Rec 66, which I dare say Victoria is going to ask about. Yeah, and I've just heard it from the chief that it's probably better that you and Jake just stay away from this one.
So I think Jake was the seconder, so that might need...
No, I'm the seconder of another one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just
So if that can be noted, please, that
Yeah.
we conflicted out of... Is that out of the entirety of 66, please, or just part of it?
I think the entirety.
okay. Any questions on Yanni? This is Milton Street, more or
Yeah,
less.
so this is Milton Street. So just want to be really clear about the difference between the amendment and the hearing panel's recommendation. What does it mean in regards to height and what's permitted?
You want the picture?
Block in the middle. A very small block that is highlighted as part of the industrial zoning or mixed use zoning that's there. And it's simply about aligning the high density how the subdivision has changed. It's an extremely small change to the zoning, simply to reflect the current subdivision plan of the site. That's all.
Okay. So, and why didn't the hearing panel approve that?
They didn't make comment on it at all. They simply made a recommendation to say hold the high density zoning as notified, and this change came about post notification. So they simply admitted to acknowledge that it had changed.
Right. And does that mean it's like, I'm just trying to think of like the democratic process around that. Does that mean people wouldn't have made submissions to the IHB because they weren't aware of the proposed change?
No, they did make submissions to make that change. So Christchurch NZ made a submission to make that change. The IHP, for whatever reason, didn't comment on it. They simply said it as notified. That's all. So it appears that
they just
admitted
ignored the submission, basically.
It's on the screen now, Yanni, if you want to have a look at it.
So it's just that little purple block, but the IHP, who we're paying a lot of money to, just basically ignored the submission.
The IHP took all relevant considerations into account. They've said that in their report many times. The RMA says that there's no obligation for the IHP to expressly refer to any particular submission.
Right.
So they may not have expressly referred to it. It doesn't mean they ignored it.
Right, okay.
Thank you, mate. Right, 67, perimeter block control, Sam.
It's probably a bit the same as Yanni's last question, just around what's being recommended here versus what the hearings panel did. And I guess just with the changes removing Barrington, Bishopdale and Hallswell, I was just trying to understand whether this is still needed.
In terms of your last question, yes, it is still needed. I'll come into the reasons in a moment. So the notified position was that select local centres would have a greater degree of intensification beyond the MDRS. So the notified position was to introduce what's called a local centre intensification precinct that would enable 14 metres instead of the 12 metres from the MDRS for select centres. I believe it's an order of 5 or so. And then through the hearings process, council's position was changed to include that to 8 centres. In some instances, those walking catchments were increased, and so that was the earlier addition to include the Barrington, Bishopdale and Hallswell, which has since been rescinded. The hearings panel recommendation, instead of focusing on what the council's final position was for those 8 centres, was to say that all local centres should be captured as part of a Policy 3 response, and that Policy 3 response should just be medium density. And so in doing so, they rejected the recommendations for the local centre intensification precinct, which was to increase the height to 14, but also to introduce what's known as perimeter block controls. And that was to more easily provide for development along the front proportion of sites, and so common wall sites or developments along the front of sites to enable comprehensive development. And that was to effectively say that the recession plane controls that would be applying between sites wouldn't apply for the first 20 metres of parcel depth, or 60% of parcel depth, whichever's lesser, up to 12 metres in this instance of height, which would be enabled. And so the amendment alternative that's been put forward by Councillor Templeton is to ensure that the local centre intensification precinct element, which captured that part of perimeter block controls, is applied across all of those local centres that the hearings panel have identified, so those that 200 metre walking catchment, to enable that, more easily enable that comprehensive development of perimeter block controls. It doesn't increase the height, it retains the medium density zone, it just makes that exemption for recession planes along the front proportion easier to enable that type of development.
It'd be just bringing them closer to the front.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
So is that going to be bringing them closer to the boundary? Is that effectively the only change?
There's no change to the front yard setback that retains at 1.5 metre setback. Yep. It's more around development along neighbouring properties, and so it means that with that control it's far easier for a said developer to buy multiple lots and then develop all along the front of those lots, because the recession plane controls are removed to enable that comprehensive development.
Right, okay. So then what was the difference? So there's the 400 metre catchment that was, it's been removed, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand what that
was.
Yeah, so what's that?
So the part that's no longer being progressed as part of this alternative was aligning with the council position, which was to say that select local centres were had merit in terms of having a commensurate response that had a greater level of intensification. So the council's evidence was that those three centres, Barrington, Bishopvale and Hallswell, presented as having an opportunity to have a greater level of intensification. And so, as I said, that was to increase the walking catchment to a 400 metre catchment, again having 14 metres and the perimeter block controls as well.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, so if that had been, I'm just trying to conceptualise in my mind, if that had been in there, there'd be more intensification, but because it's been removed, there's less.
Yeah, and by more intensification, I mean easier to do comprehensive development. There's no change in heights. It's simply about being more lenient for that recession plane control.
Yeah, okay, that seems pretty sensible then. Yep, okay.
Yeah.
So pretty much everywhere else around the city, the IHP has said you need more development, including like the radio pathways, and obviously they've changed their mind on that. But in these areas where you've got these neighbourhood local centres, they're saying, no, just keep it as it is.
No, that's incorrect. So there's no medium density for many of these centres, and so medium density would come about because of the walking catchment approach of 200 metres from this 30 or so local centres.
Right, so these centres are being intensified.
Just a medium density. Yeah.
Right, and the only difference is the recession plane stuff to make it easier.
Through this alternative, correct, yeah.
Right.
All right, good, thank you. So we're up to Daresbury House, number 68. Any questions? I dare say it'll be the same for Antonio Hall and Pico Residential Area. Yanni, please, yep.
So if we vote against this, and if we reject it, so we make no decision, then we're only talking about 10 days until we make a decision as part of PC 13.
No. So the PC 13 decision is around residential heritage areas. This is an item.
Oh,
and
right,
so
sorry.
if the...
Next year, a year.
Yeah, if it was rejected, then it would just be kept as status quo.
Sorry, but it says no decision is required until 12th December 2025 in the thing. So is that when PC 13 is coming back?
No. So what was put forward is that to say that this is a qualifying matter, but it sits outside of a Policy 3 catchment. So we're not required to make a decision of that this year, but we have to make a decision on the balance of Plan Change 14, i.e. outside of Policy 3 catchments, by the end of next year. And so we need to decide on whether or not it is a qualifying matter by the end of next year. So that's why it states that.
Right, but in terms of PC 13, are we going to still have to make a decision around this property to remove it as a heritage listing?
No, the withdrawal is only around residential heritage areas. This is not part of that. Pico Shanders.
Right. Now we have now come to the end of them. So we will now debate the alternative recommendations from 51 to 70. Who wants to go first, please? Tim?
In general, I'll support them, but 65, I find it hard to think that 2 to 3% of that area between Brougham Street and Moorhouse Ave are not storage. Like 97% of it is just storage. How do you define storage? Is it a working warehouse? I mean, and I know the area very well, and there's Michael Wakefield, others, they have very big warehouses there, but they are being used. There's also car sales who are now, although they're storing a large number of their cars, they're also working out of there as a second to their main yard. So, and there are 101 different companies in there doing different things, whether it's camshafts or brakes or whatever. So I'm still a wee bit in. I just haven't seen enough to change the designation of that area. So I won't be supporting. I won't be supporting 65.3, but I will be supporting the rest of it. So thank you.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you. A number of these alternate recommendations here are getting the bespoke piece of this PC14 that we were looking for when we went to the government and said, look, give us a chance to make this more Christchurch centric. So it's good to see a number of neighbourhood changes here to try and bring the PC14 changes back within expectations of communities that they can learn to live with. Some of the height changes being proposed, you'll notice in my alternate recommendation around the Hornby high density to 12 metres. I would have liked to have taken that lower, but we can't go lower than the existing operative district plan. So 12 metres, 11 plus 1 equals 12. So we've had to go to 12. So we're trying to get this to a bespoke solution which better fits our communities. Hopefully we can all support each other around this because we're trying to do the best for our communities in what we're facing. And hopefully when the alternate recommendations go to the Minister, with the backing submissions and evidence, we'll be able to also have the Minister back us as a city and say this is the bespoke that you guys needed. So hopefully we can get this landed. It's been an interesting process through this, and hopefully we can all get the good outcome for our communities.
Okay, Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, I mean, it's been an interesting process. I think, this is obviously a government initiative to look at more housing options for people. I was really struck over the past sort of year or so, hearing from young people about wanting more options, and I think this will address some of that. Obviously, we weren't happy with the entirety of the government's suggestions, but I think, always looking for that Christchurch option was an intelligent and important way to look at things. I feel like the process has been really, really good. I mean, I certainly want to commend staff like Ike and Mark for the incredible amount of work you've put into this. The detail has been amazing, and your comprehensive understanding of the situation has been really, really useful for what is an incredibly difficult thing to understand at times. So I think I'm going to support most of them. I think we've come to a really good solution for the people of Christchurch into the future. It's not always going to be perfect, but I'm pretty pleased with where we've got to. So cheers.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Kelly, for that. But can I please just draw your attention to number 65? And as I've indicated previously, that I don't support that extending north of Beeley Ave, and I think we're going to deal with that
we're going to do it separate
when you put the recommendation. But can I please encourage councillors to have a look at that? It's an absolutely enormous area, and when we think that we're really trying to get the very central city developed first, you've got Merivale up there, the central city. I don't think we need that great huge piece in there at the moment. we can bring that, if we want to deal with that later on in the years to come, we'll see how things go. We could always look at it later in another plan change, but I really do not think that we need to have that in there right now. So I won't be supporting that amendment north of Beeley Ave, and I really do hope that other councillors support me in that today, because it's enormous and I don't think it's necessary. Thank you.
Okay, Melanie, please.
Okay, so look, with the alternate recommendations on town centre, large town centres, and local centres, I've actually decided not to support any of those, because we have centre classifications, and it makes sense to me, if we're going to be logical about it, which is the way that the IHP has approached it with these, is that all large town centres should be treated the same. All town centres, all local centres. I just don't think that we should be picking and choosing which ones that we decide, potentially could have been expanded, but that's been taken out, or ones that should be, where intensification to be taken out. Why should one part of town, local centre, be treated differently to another one? Whatever we do it the same. So I can't support any of those. With the heritage listings, I'm actually going to vote not to support those either. I think we should leave that because we don't need to decide on those ones at the moment. I will support the alternative recommendation for the sunlight qualifying matter, which was part of our original council decision. And with the mixed use in Sydenham, I support that. So I'm supporting where the IHP came to. So in your area, Pauline, I'm supporting what they've put through, not Sarah's a part of that, but I will support part 4, because their intention was not to decrease intensification there, and we're not doing that. We're just making it mixed use without having the height limit there. So I think that's where I'm at.
Tyler, please.
Cool. Kia ora koutou. I'm just going to refer back to part 69 and 70 in regards to Antonio Hall and Pico Crescent. To be honest, the time is now. It's been a long time coming. And even though it sits outside of the policy, 3 regulations, I'm able to talk on it from a position of perspective and experience within Riccarton. And that is one of the key contributors to one of the issues in Upper Riccarton and the Central Riccarton area. Seeing a big rundown house, which was rich in colonial architecture more than 100 years ago, is no longer that. And I'm extremely disappointed to see it's come to this. And we do understand, based off of the arson attacks and also the inability to have action placed upon it, we're stuck in this position. So I actually please ask my colleagues to support those, because the time is now. Students are not going to be coming to Christchurch less, particularly with the new units that are being built. And we need some options for renters, for homeowners, and for students to be able to make Riccarton a really good place to live, work and play. I'm actually in support of Councillor Templeton's motion in 65. I think it's a great option, provides walkable catchments, and we all have been saying that we need to reinvigorate the central city, and it looks like it's doing a really good job in addressing that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was Dean's Avenue, and while I support Councillor Keown's motion, I'd actually like to go back to the drawing board and see if we're able to go into a mixed use area, and I'm wondering if we might be able to push that one out if it's okay with Councillor Keown, or even if it's in order. One thing I'd like to see is actually a mixed use commercial and residential compound. It's a perfect position for it, hotels there, and there was an odd consent that actually asked for that too, but it was turned down many years ago. So that's one of my questions I can put to staff to see if that's all right, if we can revisit that and maybe look at mixed use for that area, and if Councillor Keown would be open for that, I'm willing to see if we can make some changes there. Kia ora.
Can we do that in there at this late moment?
Let's adjourn the voting and we can get some staff advice later.
Righto. Aaron.
So because we've suspended standing orders, can I just ask a question on that of staff? How we would, because I'm open to that, but I'd asked that question during the process and I thought we couldn't, but can we? Because it's about just getting an outcome for the site. I mean, it's a prime site in the inner city and there's probably no one at the table that doesn't think something great should be there.
In terms of the advice that we would give on the scope of the NPSGD changes and Policy 3, it's the officer view, and which was endorsed by the hearings panel, that is outside of scope. That doesn't mean to say that council is unable to put forward an alternative recommendation to the hearings panel, but we're simply saying that the merits of that under the Act, as also endorsed by the hearings panel, is not supported. And so in our view, the chances of that the minister supporting that is very limited. But like I said, if you feel the need that you wish to proceed with that, then...
So is there a chance that the minister might see that and go, oh, that's a pleasant surprise, I'll go along with that because that makes sense?
Can't really comment. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think probably what the best idea is to bring 55 back and also 54, this one.
Yes.
Not vote from this part of this block and then get some staff advice and come back later in the afternoon.
After lunch.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we'll be singing off the same song sheet. Okay. Is there any more debate on this? Vic, then Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to start by thanking Ike and Brent and Mark for the enormous amount of work that's gone into here and your assistance with our councillor recommendations. And I know there's a lot of staff behind the scenes as well. We're really grateful for your guidance and helping us get our heads around this. And for me, at risk of stating the obvious, we know the city's growing, and with that comes the inevitable change. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with change. And thank you to the public who have come in here today and have taken a huge interest in this. I think the challenge for us as city leaders is to make sure that we are putting in place a framework to guide and manage that growth. And so what we're doing here is just influencing it. We're not changing anything significant. It's about the bespoke planning framework for this beautiful city that we've all chosen to call our home. So for me, I've looked really carefully at the evidential basis on some of these things, and some of them are getting quite close to the line in terms of the intent and the strategic direction and purpose of the plan change. So from my perspective, I can see where it is I am, and I'm not going to support. And I trust that the colleagues and indeed the public, that they understand the difference between what we can and can't do today as councillors. That's quite a segue into the number 52 for the Papanui War Memorial Avenues. Just letting my colleagues know, if you're not familiar with this area, they are beautiful tree-lined streets with plaques where the trees have been planted in memory of the fallen soldiers in World War II. I would have dearly loved to exclude the War Memorial Avenues from the intensification, but in doing so, that was just getting really too close to the line. There was evidence to support it, but geographically it was difficult to isolate it out and extract it from the HRZ zone. So in short, the amendment that I've done is giving an added layer of protection and skirting around the edge of the risk that I would have otherwise had if I'd tried to exclude the area completely, because it's likely that would have got thrown out. So I think that I've found a middle ground, and I'd urge you to support that number 52. And for the most part, I'm satisfied with a number of the other amendments. One or two of them have got a bit close to the line for me, and I won't be supporting those. And that's really because it just departs from the strategic aims and objectives of what we're trying to do with Plan Change 14. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate a lot of the time and effort that my colleagues have put into some of these amendments, and some I'm happy to support, others not so much. But, you know, fundamentally, I think it's for me, it's not a case of being against intensification, but it's actually having good urban design. And I draw, you know, on the evidence that was presented to the IHP from a submitter, and this was a report into high-rise apartments and urban mental health. And it really hits it on the head for me in terms of the way in which we're designing our city and the impact that these plan changes and these rule changes can have. And it basically talks about, in conclusion, inequitable approaches to urban design have a powerful influence in perpetuating social disadvantage and mental adversity. The socioeconomic status of intended residents remains a dominant undercurrent in divergent approaches to high-rise building design in high-density urban cities. With increasing urban migration, this will amplify health inequities, stress, crime, poverty, and making cities increasingly unhealthy unless new approaches are mandated. Our investigation of the relationships between the high-rise living and the social and mental well-being revealed clear evidence that location plays a key role in the socio-economic structure of the building. Poorly thought-out placement of high-rise buildings can have an adverse socio-economic effect on city areas, with a flow-on effect to the people living in those areas. In addition, a concentration of disadvantaged residents in one high-rise building increases the risk of adverse mental health outcomes. It goes on to talk that there's a suggestion that ideally with urban planners working closely with communities they serve to create the healthier environments, and that actually this is a better approach. And so when I look at some of the amendments around Hornby and Linwood, and I think of those communities and the research and the impact that we have of high density, to me it seems clear that we need to do more work in that space to get good urban design. So it's not a case of having a whole bunch of intensive housing imposed on a community without working with those communities to ensure that the benefits that accrue from that intensification are actually realised. And what's really clear to me is that a number of things in this plan change do not actually address having good, well-designed urban environments that lead to better, healthier environments. So, I will support a lot of these amendments. I also just want to talk though through the frustration with the city spine. What a really clear, obvious thing that recommendation from the hearing panel could cost us billions of dollars of having to acquire land and property and remove and demolish for all the negative environmental and unsustainable consequences, let alone the financial affordability of actually getting our mass rapid transit in place. And so again, I talk to the frustration with this entire process where we don't seem to have control and could lead to really perverse outcomes long term for us when we actually want to get a more dense city, but with good urban form.
Thank you, Yanni. And Sarah, please.
Kia ora koutou. So these are not easy decisions, and as Councillor Johansson has just outlined, there are pros and cons for a range of different things when it comes to density. One of the biggest pros, of course, is being able to provide more people with warm, dry homes in a space that is close to all of the amenities that they need. But it is not easy, and some of these do have really long-term impacts. And I'd like to thank colleagues for their really thoughtful discussion, not just today, but over a really long period of time about how we do this plan change and develop the city over a long period of time. One thing that we've all agreed on over time is that intensifying in the central city earlier is the best thing to do. And when we look at the city as a whole in a really large area, the central part of the city, not just the CBD, the central part of the city, is bigger than just the 4 avenues. And if we want to ease the pressure on the outer areas and the outer suburbs, then we need to make sure that we do as much kind of density, good density, well-designed density as we can, as close to town as possible. It also brings those added benefits of greater vibrancy and business viability in the central city for hospitality, retail, and all of those other things. The mixed use piece in Sydenham is a piece that's been looked at for a really long time. It's something that the panel was generally supportive of, and it was just that High Court precedent that really stopped it being recommended by the panel. And we've managed to find a way, thanks to Councillor Coker, to make sure that we can actually do that as part of this plan change. So I'd like to encourage people to do that. When it comes to that walking catchment for the central city, I'd like to remind people that the NPSUD actually requires a walking catchment for the central city, but that the Beeley Ave end of the central city has a 0 metres walking catchment. And it still baffles me as to why the panel did that. So I think we do need a walking catchment, and connecting the central city up Papanui Road to the higher density area of Mirabale just seems to me to make sense. And I did really make sure that I tried to pull it in away from that Edgware area and just have it much smaller close to the central city. But I think that fulfills the purpose of the NPSUD. When it comes to those perimeter blocks, we hear from our communities all the time they don't like those sausage block developments that are going in and intensifying everywhere. And what perimeter blocks does is make it a much nicer amenity for our residents closer to those local centres, ones like the ones in Selwyn Street, rather than a whole pile of sausage developments. So thank you very much.
Okie dokie. Right. Andre.
Thank you. I can't speak to every amendment. There isn't enough time in 3 minutes. I'm just going to make some more general points that we've heard over the last 3 years in this debate. One being that supply and demand doesn't impact cost. It's really basic economic theory that supply and demand does impact cost. If you disagree, write a new economic textbook. I'll buy it. I'm very curious to read it. I'm also curious about the claims that making it cheaper to build homes, which this does, won't make homes cheaper. What absolute garbage. If you can reduce the cost of building, of course it reduces the cost. One of the debates I've also heard around this table is capacity. We don't need to enable more housing because we've got heaps of capacity. The housing crisis is all solved. We've got capacity. Well, go tell that to someone in emergency housing, say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. There's plenty of capacity out in that great big world. You need to build homes. They're not being built because it's too expensive to build and there's too many restrictions to build them. Capacity is not the answer. The district plan, it is failing renters, first home buyers, young people, older people. It's failing all sorts of people. It might be working well for some, might be working well for your personal situation, but it is failing many others, and we do need to care about their interests as well because we represent everyone. I'm sick of hearing nonsensical arguments like we can't build apartments because they're not suitable for families. 42% of households are families with children in them. So what about the other 58%? What about young professionals, students, retirees? They want to live on their own or with their partner and they don't want a big section to maintain. So does this mean that we can't build 3 or 4 story single story homes because they don't suit certain types of households? No, it doesn't, because that's a stupid, illogical argument. You build different types of homes for different types of households. The more apartments you've got, the more space you actually end up for families with yards. I don't believe in forcing families into apartments. Likewise, I don't believe forcing people who don't want to be in big homes into big homes like what we're doing currently. And that's because we refuse to allow housing choice. Just want to quote Chris Bishop at the LGNZ conference, which was, where do you get off telling people what types of homes they can and can't live in? And that resonates with me because I don't think that is our job to tell people they can and can't live in. Endlessly building out onto productive food growing land adds continual burden to ratepayers. Something's got to give at some point. It's easier to build and sell, and sure enough, more homes being built there. We keep losing ratepayers, but they use our infrastructure. What I will be supporting in here, though, is the Hornby-based amendments. Inner Christchurch should be intensified before outer Christchurch. Number 65, enabling more housing where people can walk to town, for example, makes a lot of sense in my view. And just finally, a message to some of the Labour members around the table. I think Norman Kirk would be rolling in his grave if he knew that Labour-affiliated members were actively trying to block housing all over different parts of Christchurch. As for the points around mental health, what's a huge burden on mental health is people who can't afford a place to live, don't have options. When they go and trade me looking for a one-bedroom for themselves, everything's $350, $400 a week at least. That takes a toll on mental health. What would be good for someone like that in their mental health is if they did have the option, if they wanted to live with a 180-degree view of Christchurch on an upper story somewhere. Some people want to live in places like that. Who are we to deny it?
Thank you. Right.
Yeah, hey, thank you. I thought it's usually me that's criticising the Labour members around this table. So there's a first for everything. Yeah. No, look, probably the same as the team have mentioned. Just acknowledge the team that have put a lot of work into this. It's not easy, and I think we've taken a lot of time to get up to speed to it. But I think the way you've been able to explain it is really useful. It's actually led to some good amendments. You judge the nature of this morning. And the fact that we're all actually willingly engaged, I think, is a really good thing because we've all worked through it with you, and I just want to acknowledge you all for the work you've done there. Look, I would really like people to support what I've put up, particularly around the airport noise and stuff, that actually is a sensible way of allowing more housing to occur, but in a considered way that reduces compliance costs with the airport. You think about how that works, that is a really good thing. The local centres thing as well, particularly in my community where I've put them up around Pier Street, and they call them local centres. If anyone's been to the Pier Street New World, that is what they're calling the local centre. It is literally a new world with a car park. If you think about that, it does not make sense in terms of that and the communities around it. We already have massive intensification. You think about the retirement villages next to it, but actually the residential side, it just does not make sense backing onto that. The same at Avonhead Mall. If you look at that, again, it is another supermarket with, I think, a hairdresser and a Monteith's. You know, these are tiny, tiny places where we're looking at doing, major sort of significant things to them. And it does worry me. So I would appreciate people having the chance I'd appreciate the Minister having the chance to have a say on whether he thinks that's appropriate or not. And that's ultimately what we're doing today. Just the other thing, just so that we're all really clear and for anyone watching is, there's a large part of this that hasn't been adopted today, which is the overall 3x3 across the city. And the council did take an active stand against that back in the day. And I think that led to some pushback in Wellington, which I think is a good thing for the city. So while we're making a bit of progress, there is still another challenge next year when actually we need to provide our case or state our case to ensure we don't have that 3x3 everywhere, because that fundamentally changes the fabric of Christchurch. Look, by and large, these amendments make sense. I'm probably a bit with Pauline in terms of number 65, and that the north side of Bailey Ave, to me, that's a significant change, and that does worry me. But again, 67, I'm sort of on the fence with as well. I would encourage people to have a look at Antonio Hall and Desbury House and Pico Residential. Again, if we're talking about putting more housing onto the market, if you look at Desbury House, for example, $12 million to fix it, and the evidence is really clear, and it adds $1.5 million of value to it. It will sit there for years and years and years, and there's not a case for it. And I just hope that we take a pragmatic view to that today. I respect entirely the heritage of our city, but sometimes, and we've seen it since the earthquakes, things just do not add up, and in this case, it does not add up. So this is not an anti-heritage position. This is a pragmatic way to move our city forward. I would love to see it restored, but until Heritage New Zealand has big pots of money to fund this stuff, economically, people will not do it, and will sit on land where people cannot put houses. So I do hope that people take that approach as well.
Thank you. Anyone else like to have a bit of debate? All right, we'll start down the track. Mark, go away. Right, so Mark's sitting back from this one. This is recommendation Rec 51. They've all been moved and seconded. So I'll put that one for Riccarton Bush interface. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Rec number 52, the Papanui War Memorial Avenues. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. High density residential zone catchment around Riccarton. Rec 53. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Brilliant. Thank you. Now. Okay.
So, sorry, recommendation 53A2, that's councillors Moore and Templeton against.
Yep, sorry. So the next two, 54 and 55, staff will come back to us after lunch. Right, City Spine qualifying matter, Rec 56. All those in favour? Right. Against? That's carried. Sorry. 56? Am I going too quick? Sorry.
People can't turn the paper as fast as you can.
So see this? Okay. Is it so? Everyone's happy. No, sorry, I might have been a bit quick. Number 50, Rec 56, City Spine qualifying matter. We all there? Happy? All those in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you. That's great. Sunlight access qualifying matter, Rec 57. All of those in favour? Aye. Against? So we've got Andre?
Was that you, Councillor McClellan? Or
No.
Councillor Moore?
Okay. High density residential zone catchment around Hornby Town Centre, Rec 58. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Can I please have against hands raised?
For no.
Councillor Coker
And Cotter.
and Deputy Mayor Cotter.
You're
Thank you.
good. Thank you. High density residential zone permitted building height in Hornby, Rex 59. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Councillor Coker. Anyone else?
Town centre zone permitted building heights in Hornby, Rec 60. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Councillors Coker and Deputy Mayor Cotter.
Yep. Town centre zone building heights and form for Linwood, Rec 61. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Councillors Coker, Deputy Mayor Cotter, and
Councillor
Councillor Templeton.
Okay, we're going good. High density residential walking catchment around Linwood Town Centre zone, Rec 62. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
That's Councillors Coker, Moore. Yes, thank you. Any others?
Happy? Good, thank you. High density residential zone permitted building heights in Linwood, Rec 63. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
So it's Councillors Coker, Templeton, Moore. And that should be it. That's great.
Okay, airport noise influence area controls, Rec 64. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Okay. Yanni and Jake. That one, yep. Now, this one, we're going to pull it to bits and do two, are we?
No. We can vote on this in separate parts.
So if you would, yes.
65 we're talking about.
We just need clarification on how to vote if we don't support the amendment for north of Beeley Ave. So I'd say that is 1 and 2. Am I correct? Well, hang on. Can we just get an answer to that first?
I think if it's north of Morehouse, it's 2, is it?
North of Morehouse. I'm
Beeley.
talking north of
Beeley,
Beeley.
sorry. Wrong one.
Just
So-
2.
So 2 captures all increases to high density, full stop. And so that is all the expansion to the north is high density. Like I said before, there is very isolated areas of high density on the southern end as well. And so not voting against that also does that. In terms of the interplay with the first and I, that is still needed in terms of the catchment to capture the mixed use. And so effectively, if someone were, or if council were to vote in favour of I and not II, but still in Roman numeral 3, that means that they're accepting a walking catchment of 1.2 and they're only applying it to the mixed use. Simple as that.
So we only need to oppose 2.
If you're correct, yeah.
What's A3 then? So
Yeah, hang on a minute.
I was just thinking maybe we bring this one back after lunch as well.
Yes. The heads are spinning a wee bit. Okay, righty-ho. So we're now up to Rec 66, which is high-density residential zoning for Milton Street and Johnson Street. All those in favour?
Can we just
Aye.
note that McClellan and I
Yeah, sorry, Jake and
conflicted, thank you.
Victoria can't. So, sorry, all those in favour? Aye. Against? That's brilliant. That's good, thank you. Perimeter block controls, Rec 67. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
That's Councillor Kewen.
Yep.
And an abstention from Councillor Johansson.
Yep. Number 68, Daresbury House Heritage Listing. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Can I please get the noes, recommendation 68? That's Councillor Coker, it's Councillor Johansson. Any further noes? No. And the abstentions for 68? That's Councillor McClellan and Deputy Mayor Cotter. Any further?
Okay. Thank you. Number 69, Antonio Hall, heritage listing. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Pico residential character area, Rec 70. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Yanni.
So it's, and again, it's for councillor.
So, let's say we say 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for getting to where we've got to. There's one hell of a lot of work gone into this by staff, and a little bit by us. But no, it's been actually good to get to this point. So we'll have lunch now till 2 o'clock, and at that time, staff will come back and fill in some couple of wee gaps that we've got.